The day they killed Jesus, the Roman soldiers made a mistake. They didn't do their job. There was an order. Clear. Simple. One they had carried out hundreds of times before. No thinking required. They get to the first man. They do it. They get to the second. They do it. They walk toward Jesus. And they stop. Silence. The mallet doesn't fall. No reason. No explanation. They just move on. What they didn't know, what they never knew, is that moment, those few seconds of pure indifference, was recorded in a Hebrew text written 500 years before they were born. They weren't instructed. They weren't stopped. Nobody convinced them of anything. They just didn't feel like lifting the mallet. And in doing that, without knowing it, without looking for it, they fulfilled a prophecy no human being could have coordinated. That's what we're opening today. Because if this is true and we're going to look at exactly why it is, it changes how you read that chapter. And it changes how you understand what's happening in your own life right now. Stay with me. To understand why they broke the legs, you first need to understand how crucifixion actually killed. Because most people picture it wrong. Crucifixion didn't kill primarily through blood loss. That surprises people. The nails through the wrists and feet caused unimaginable pain, but those wounds weren't immediately fatal. The Romans had done this thousands of times. They knew exactly how to make death slow. So what killed? Asphyxiation. When the body hangs vertically with the arms extended, the chest muscles lock in a position that makes exhaling nearly impossible. To breathe out, the crucified person had to push themselves up using their feet against the nails, just to release air from their lungs. Down. Push up to breathe. Down. Push up to breathe. 4 hours. Sometimes days. It was total physical exhaustion dragged all the way to death. The Romans called it summum supplicium, the supreme punishment, reserved for escaped slaves, traitors, and the worst class of criminals. A death designed to be public, prolonged, and completely degrading. Now you understand why what happens next changes everything. The procedure had a Latin name, crucifixion, literally leg fracture. Here's how it worked. If the Romans needed someone to die quickly on the cross, for any reason, they came with an iron mallet or bar and shattered the tibias. Sometimes the femur too. Why did that speed up death? Because if you can no longer push up with your feet, you can no longer breathe. With broken legs, that agonizing push upward becomes impossible. The body collapses. The lungs can't empty. Death follows within minutes from acute asphyxiation. It was brutal. But in the twisted logic of the Roman system, it was also practical. A way to finish the job when time was running short. And why would time be running short that particular Friday? Because it was Passover Eve. The most sacred day of the Jewish calendar was beginning at sundown. Leaving bodies hanging through the Sabbath night was a violation of religious law the Jewish leaders could not allow. They went to Pilate and asked him to speed up the deaths. Pilate ordered the crucifixion. The soldiers obeyed. They went to the 2 men crucified beside Jesus and broke their legs. Then they came to Jesus. Open the Gospel of John, chapter 19, verses 33 through 36. Read it like nobody ever told you this story before. Not like something from Sunday school. Like a friend just called you and said, "You need to read this. You won't believe what happened." It says, "But when they came to Jesus and saw that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. But one of the soldiers pierced his side with a spear, and at once blood and water came out. He who saw it has borne witness. His testimony is true, and he knows that he is telling the truth, that you also may believe. For these things took place that the scripture might be fulfilled, not one of his bones will be broken." Stop there. John isn't recording a minor medical detail. He's talking about prophecy. Not one of his bones will be broken. That line comes from Psalm 34, verse 20. It also appears in the Passover instructions in Exodus 12. The sacrificial lamb could not have a single broken bone. Written centuries before that afternoon on Golgotha. And that afternoon, while Roman soldiers carried out an execution routine they'd done hundreds of times, knowing nothing about Hebrew prophecy, caring nothing about theology, they looked at Jesus and saw he was already dead. And they didn't lift the mallet. Not out of obedience to scripture. Out of indifference. And it was fulfilled anyway. But there's something else. Something most people pass over because it comes right after the bones verse and looks like a footnote. A soldier walks up to Jesus with a spear and pierces his side. John says blood and water came out. That's not a decorative detail. And John knows it. which is why he does something he almost never does in his gospel. He stops and certifies his own testimony. He who saw it has borne witness, and his testimony is true. Why does John feel the need to say that? Why does a witness have to clarify that he's telling the truth? Because he knew someone someday would ask exactly the question you might be asking right now. What if the disciples just invented these details to match the prophecies? It's a fair question. It deserves a real answer. Think it through. The Crucifixion wasn't planned by the disciples. It was ordered by Jewish religious leaders who needed the bodies down before the Sabbath. It was carried out by Roman soldiers with zero theological interest. And it was documented by a witness who understood much later what he had actually seen. Nobody at that scene was thinking about Exodus 12 or Psalm 34. They were doing their jobs. And in doing their jobs, two prophecies written centuries apart, by different authors in completely different contexts, were fulfilled in the same moment. One said his bones would not be broken. The other said he would be pierced. No human writer could have coordinated that. No group of disciples with an agenda could have controlled what Roman soldiers decided to do that afternoon. What happened that Friday wasn't a setback in God's plan. It was the plan. And the blood and water detail, medically consistent with death already having occurred before the spear arrived, means John was documenting something real. Not building a convenient narrative. Something so specific and so strange that he felt compelled to put his own name on it. That other prophecy comes from Zechariah, chapter 2 prophecies. Two different authors. Centuries apart. Neither knowing the other existed. Both fulfilled by people who had never read either one. That's not coincidence. That's not editing after the fact. That's a pattern that points somewhere. And here's where it points, not just back to that Friday but forward. To you right now. If God can work through the indifference of a soldier who didn't know him, wasn't looking for him, and had no idea he was part of something larger, what can he do with the parts of your life that make no sense right now? The hardest question isn't whether you believe in the loud miracles. The seas splitting, the army stopping. The harder question is whether you can see God moving in a Roman soldier who simply decided the mallet wasn't worth lifting. That's sovereignty too. The darkest week of your life might be writing something you can't read yet. That's not a cliche. That's what this Friday teaches. Before you go, if this opens something for you, share it. Not for the channel. Because there's someone in your life asking the most honest question a person can ask. Is there any real evidence for this? Today you found some of that evidence in the last place anyone would look. In the indifference of a Roman soldier who never lifted his mallet. If you want to keep going, the next video is about the soldier who did use his weapon that day. The one who drove the spear into Jesus' side. What happened to him afterward is one of the most unexpected stories in early Christian history. Subscribe so you don't miss it. God bless you.